How well do you truly know the person on the other side of the screen? We build friendships, romances, entire lives in the digital realm, trusting the profiles and pictures we see. But what happens when the person you've fallen for doesn't exist? And what if the puppeteer pulling the strings of that fake identity has a motive so dark it ends in real-world murder? Our story begins in the quiet town of Olean, New York, in 2006. In the cold, pre-dawn darkness of a factory parking lot, a 22-year-old man named Brian Barrett was found shot to death. To his family and friends, Brian was a kind, hardworking young man with no known enemies. The police were initially baffled. It looked like a senseless, random act of violence with no robbery and no clear motive. The investigation started with Brian's life, and detectives quickly found that his world extended far beyond his small town. He was deeply enmeshed in an intense online romance. Her name was Jessi, screen name Talonbabe, and she was, by all accounts, his everything. Her profile painted a picture of an 18-year-old, blonde, popular high school girl living in West Virginia. Brian was completely smitten. Their chat logs revealed a whirlwind romance, filled with declarations of love and plans for a future together. He believed he had found his soulmate. But as investigators began to dig into this digital relationship, they uncovered a bizarre and disturbing complication that would turn the entire case on its head. Brian wasn't the only man from his workplace involved with Jessi. Thomas Montgomery, a 47-year-old married man and Brian's coworker, was also deeply entangled in the online world of Jessi. Montgomery, using the alias Sniper and pretending to be a young, decorated soldier, had been communicating with her for over it. He saw himself as her protector, her online confidant, blurring the lines between paternal affection and romantic obsession. The dynamic was a digital love triangle, simmering with jealousy and resentment. When Brian began a relationship with Jessi, Thomas Montgomery felt betrayed and pushed aside. His fantasy was being stolen from him by a younger man. The chat logs between Sniper and Talonbabe shifted from flirtatious to angry, filled with Montgomery's accusations and his growing rage toward Brian Barrett. The first major crack in the facade appeared when detectives tried to find the real Jessi. They traced the photos on her profile to a high school student who lived hundreds of miles away and had no idea her pictures were being used. She had never spoken to Brian or Thomas. The girl they had both fallen in love with, the girl at the center of this fatal obsession, was a ghost. With the realization that Jessi was a complete fabrication, suspicion immediately fell upon Thomas Montgomery. He had the clearest motive: extreme jealousy. He was a middle-aged man living a mundane life, pretending to be a young hero online. Had he become so lost in his own deception that he would kill to protect it when his fantasy world was threatened? Investigators brought Thomas Montgomery in for questioning. He was a man living a double life. At home, he was a husband and a father to 2 teenage daughters. Online, he was a tough, battle-hardened man. He initially denied any involvement, painting himself as just another victim of this online phantom, another heartbroken suitor who had been deceived by the mysterious Jessi. But the digital breadcrumbs were undeniable. Detectives presented him with the chat logs, filled with his own words of obsession, jealousy, and eventually, thinly veiled threats directed at Brian. They showed him how his online persona had become increasingly erratic and hostile in the weeks leading up to the murder. The pressure began to build, and Montgomery's story started to crumble. The investigators also uncovered another layer to the deception. In the online narrative, Jessi had a mother named Mary who would occasionally chat with Thomas. Mary would corroborate Jessi's stories, speak of her troubles, and express her approval of Thomas's protective role. This added a crucial layer of legitimacy to the fantasy, making it seem more real and drawing Montgomery deeper into the web. The online world created around Jessi was meticulously crafted. It included not just a fake persona, but a fake family and a fake social life, all designed to make her seem like a real, breathing person. This wasn't a simple, hastily made profile. It was a long-term, calculated deception that required constant maintenance and a deep understanding of manipulation. As the interrogation wore on, Thomas Montgomery finally broke. He admitted the extent of his obsession and the depth of his rage when Brian stole Jessi from him. He confessed that his online life had become more important, more real to him than his actual life. But then, he delivered a bombshell that no one in the room was prepared for. He wasn't the one who created Jessi. The true architect of this entire fantasy, the person behind the Talon Babe profile, was his own wife, Cynthia Montgomery. The 47-year-old homemaker, sitting at her computer in their family home, had invented the 18-year-old Jessi from scratch. She had stolen the photos, crafted the personality, and for over a year she had been manipulating everyone. The motive was as twisted as the crime itself. Cynthia initially created the fake profile as a loyalty test for her husband. She wanted to see if he would engage with a younger woman online. When he not only engaged but fell completely into the trap, she didn't stop the charade. Instead, she reveled in the attention and the drama she could create from behind the safety of her screen. She was the one typing every flirtatious message to her own husband. She was the one orchestrating the entire love triangle. And when Barrett entered the picture, she skillfully played the two men against each other, fanning the flames of Thomas's jealousy. She controlled every aspect of the narrative, feeding her husband's rage while simultaneously offering a sympathetic ear as Jessi. The breakthrough was staggering. The crime wasn't the result of a simple love triangle. It was the catastrophic outcome of a bizarre, cruel marital game that had spiraled into a deadly obsession. Thomas Montgomery was not just a perpetrator of a fantasy. He was also its first victim, ensnared in a web woven by his own wife. But this revelation created a new problem. If Cynthia was the one pulling the strings, and Thomas was lost in the delusion, who actually pulled the trigger? Neither of them had been in the parking lot that morning. The investigation had unmasked the puppeteers, but the killer was still out there, a ghost in a completely different machine. The final piece of the puzzle came from Thomas Montgomery's own family. In his fits of rage over the online drama, he had vented to his teenage daughter about how Barrett had wronged him and stolen his girlfriend. He painted a picture of himself as a victim, a good soldier who had been betrayed. His daughter, believing her father's fantasy, became distressed. This distress was shared with a young man she knew, a 19-year-old coworker named Donald W. Gibson. Fueled by a misguided sense of vigilante justice and a desire to help the family of the man he saw as a hero, Gibson took it upon himself to eliminate the problem. He believed he was protecting a Marine's honor by getting rid of the man who had hurt him. On that fateful morning, Donald Gibson drove to the factory, armed with a rifle. He waited for Barrett in the darkness of the parking lot, and in a horribly misguided act of loyalty, shot and killed him. He was not motivated by his own jealousy or passion, but by the second-hand rage fed to him through a chain of digital deception. The aftermath was a legal and psychological minefield. Donald Gibson, the shooter, was quickly arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He was the hand that held the weapon, the one who committed the physical act, and the law had a clear path to prosecute him for his crime. He was sentenced to a long prison term. Thomas Montgomery's fate was more complex. He didn't kill anyone, but his words, his rage, and his deep investment in a lie he helped perpetuate directly led to the murder. He was charged with solicitation to commit murder. The prosecution argued successfully that his rants and complaints were a form of incitement, a clear signal for someone to act on his behalf. His trial exposed the terrifying power of online worlds to incite real-world violence. His defense argued he was simply venting, lost in a fantasy. But the jury saw it differently. They saw a man whose deliberate stoking of hatred and jealousy, even within a fictional context, had a direct and fatal consequence. Thomas Montgomery was found guilty. And what of Cynthia Montgomery, the mastermind? She was the one who lit the match, who created the entire scenario out of a twisted marital test. Yet, in a reflection of how the legal system was still grappling with online crimes, she faced the least severe consequences. While she was charged with lesser crimes related to the deception, she was never held directly accountable for the murder her game had caused. Her actions exposed a chilling gap in accountability. She never explicitly told anyone to harm Brian Barrett. She only created a world where such a thing became possible, even likely. She built the stage, wrote the script, and cast the actors, then watched as the tragedy she authored played out to its bloody conclusion. The legacy of the Brian Barrett case is a chilling cautionary tale for the digital age. It became one of the first and most prominent examples of catfishing, leading to murder, a term that was not yet in the mainstream lexicon. It served as a brutal lesson that the emotional connections and conflicts forged online are not just games. They have profound and dangerous real-world consequences. The case forces us to examine the very nature of motive. Was Thomas Montgomery's motive jealousy over a woman who didn't exist? Or was it the rage of having his elaborate, ego-stroking fantasy life dismantled? Was Cynthia's motive a simple loyalty test? Or did it morph into a narcissistic desire for control and a thrill from the emotional chaos she could create? Ultimately, the crime was not one of passion in the traditional sense. Brian Barrett was not murdered by a jilted lover. He was murdered by the collision of two opposing fantasies. He died because his dream of a life with Jessi conflicted with Thomas Montgomery's dream of being Sniper, a hero worthy of her affection. The story also highlights the incredible vulnerability of those seeking connection online. Brian was not foolish, he was hopeful. He invested his real emotions into a profile that was expertly designed to be loved. His trust and affection were used as weapons in a game he never even knew he was playing, a game orchestrated by a bored, manipulative woman in the next town over. The profile of Jessi became a black hole, drawing in the insecurities and desires of those around it. For Thomas, it was a chance to escape his mundane life and be a hero. For Cynthia, it was a tool for control and emotional puppetry. For Brian, it was the promise of true love. And for Donald Gibson, it was a call to arms for a cause that was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. This case leaves us with a lingering, uncomfortable truth. The greatest deceptions are not those that tell us something unbelievable, but those that tell us exactly what we want to believe. Thomas wanted to believe a beautiful young girl saw him as a hero. Brian wanted to believe he had found his perfect soulmate. Their desires made them perfect targets. It also serves as a stark reminder of the disconnect between online actions and their physical consequences. From behind a screen, stoking jealousy and rage can feel like a harmless part of a dramatic game. It's easy to forget that the person on the other end is real, and that the emotions you manipulate can spill out from the chat window and into the real world. The profile of Talonbabe is long gone, deleted from the servers where it once lived. But the ghost of Jessi still haunts this case. She remains a symbol of digital deception, a carefully constructed collection of lies that became real enough to inspire obsession, incite rage, and ultimately, to cause the death of an innocent young man. So the next time you're navigating the digital world, remember this story. Remember that behind every profile is a person with their own motives, their own secrets, and their own capacity for deception. The question we are left with is not just who are they pretending to be, but why. The answer can be the difference between a simple fantasy and a true crime nightmare.